Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Ken. It's my honor today to introduce to you our speaker, Danny Eakins. He has served as a veteran and a military community advocate for the state of Ohio for 15 years. And during his time, he has authored and implemented several state policies and programs that have expanded veterans' benefits in a number of ways. And for the last 4 years, he has served as the Ohio's designated state team leader for the National Governor's Challenge to Prevent Suicide Among Veterans, service members, and families, and working to build a more veteran-informed community. He volunteers as a trustee for the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Board of Franklin County and the Board of Brain Injury Association of Ohio. He's been twice recognized as the Veteran Advocate of the Year by the Ohio chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America in 2011 and in 2017. He's also named the Veteran Small Business Champion for 2016 by the U.S. Small Business Administration. He enlisted in the Army after the September 11th attacks on Washington and New York. And in January 2005, he was deployed to Iraq as a platoon leader with the 2nd Battalion, 34th Armor Regiment, where he led more than 300 combat patrol missions. Danny later joined the Ohio National Guard, where he served as a company commander and battalion executive officer in the 16th Engineer Brigade. He's a 1998 graduate of Miami University, and he resides here in Columbus, and it's our pleasure to have him here today. Please help me welcome Danny.
Thank you, Dana, for that introduction. And I want to thank Manana, the president, and the Speakers Bureau, Ken, for inviting me to be part of your special day today here at the Columbus Rotary. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to talk to a Rotary district and greatly enjoyed the opportunity and really do believe in the work that Rotary does and the relationships that it builds across the planet, really. Having been at the spot where, you know, civilization fails a little bit and we end up going after each other, it's heartening to know that there's organizations working around the world to build out global peace and to try to build bridges between societies and civilizations. So greatly appreciate the work that you do, and I'm happy to talk a little bit today about veteran services here in the state of Ohio, and a little bit of overview. You want to leave a little bit of time for questions. If you have any questions about what the information I presented today or just veterans in general, I'm happy to answer those. Usually I like to start out, though, I'd like to ask anyone that served in the military, could you please just raise your hand? That's a good part of the room. So obviously, I'm not terribly surprised with me, simply because obviously, you know, many veterans, you know, get imbued with a sense of public and service and service to your community and your country, and so it's heartening to see. And thank you all for your service, and thank you for being part of this Rotary experience. I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and hopefully this works. We'll see. I understand there's a bit of a delay. All right. And I apologize that that's probably a little bit like a seeing eye chart, but the purpose of it is to illustrate a little bit that the reality is I work for the Ohio Department of Veteran Services. We are the state cabinet agency tasked with helping to improve services and support for veteran and military families in the state of Ohio. But I would tell you that we're the relative newcomers in the veteran service sphere. Excuse me there. Essentially, the central point of access for veteran services in the state of Ohio is your county veteran service office. Here in Franklin County, that's the office that's actually down at the old original Veterans Memorial down on East Broad Street. And that's where those county offices have been around since the 1880s. If you look at like the major development of veteran services in the state of Ohio, it comes at about 20 years after the end of the Civil War. You have your first governor of Ohio, who's a Civil War veteran, a member of the Grand Army, the Republic of America's first large veteran organization. And you had a General Assembly, a state legislature that was made up largely of Civil War veterans. And they created the County Veteran Service System. They used to be called, a lot of folks know them as old Soldiers and Sailors Homes, or Soldiers and Sailors Offices, excuse me. And that's the place where a veteran in any county in Ohio can go to that office and get assistance from certified and trained county veteran service officers to get help with claims assistance for their claims they may make to the federal Veterans Affairs Department, or they can get in-county services such as financial assistance if they're having trouble paying their bills, if they need help, paying their rent, utilities, things to keep them in their home. And they can also get access to transportation services to those federal VA or other type of veteran-related medical appointments they may need. Now, the state dictates essentially through law what the basic level of services are, but each county is essentially given the ability to determine what those services look like in their own county. That's internal millage property tax dollars that fund those offices. I think the total value of that millage across the state, if you threw all the counties together, would be in the neighborhood of $70 million or so. But obviously, each county uses that millage differently. And in some counties, it may mean that if you come into the office, they're actually going to hand you a check that says, all right, use this to pay off whatever you need. We have some counties that they operate a little bit like a food bank where folks come in and they can get, sets of groceries and things. And then the transportation services can vary a little bit as well. Often that may be provided directly by the county where they'll hire their own vans and buses and things. Other times they may collaborate with organizations such as Disabled American Veterans or other county agencies like aging agencies and others to provide that transportation to the veterans in their community. The other major piece is the federal service, the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. In terms of a care provider and a benefits provider, this is the largest single provider in the state of Ohio and across the country, obviously. This includes services like disability and pension. Disability services are for those disabilities you may have incurred during your military service. The VA will provide a level of compensation for those disabilities. They also provide medical care for those disabilities free of charge to the veteran. And then pension is another one where that's veterans that are having difficulty economically. The VA will provide a certain level of pension to them and their caregivers to ensure that they don't fall into the poverty line, below the poverty lines. Then, of course, they provide, it's the largest single medical system in the country is the VA medical system. We're blessed here in the state of Ohio to have 5 very large VA clinics in Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton, and Chillicothe. We also have 37 community-based outpatient clinics across the state. And between those and some of the facilities we have that are just across state boundaries that our veterans access, no veteran in the state of Ohio is more than a county away from either a VA medical clinic or a community-based outpatient clinic. So it's very accessible for our veterans here in the state of Ohio. Very fortunate because there are some states, some of the big states out west, they have 1 VA clinic in the entire state. And in places like Alaska, the VA actually finances a level of transportation that includes airplanes and helicopters to make sure veterans get the care they need. Whereas, here in Ohio, you just need to drive maybe to the next county. They also provide a high level of caregiver and survivor support for dependents and particularly surviving spouses of veterans. Those are services that are ever expanding and changing. The VA kind of understands that, while obviously their primary mission is the care for the veteran, that the veteran doesn't typically live by themselves. They have a family, they have people who support them. And so it's important to ensure that those caregivers, those spouses get the level of support they need as well. And I think as we move forward, we'll begin to see those types of services from the federal VA continue to evolve. And then they also have other benefit programs that are more financially focused, like home loan programs. Those are VA subsidized home loans. The VA doesn't provide the loan. The VA just subsidizes the loan application for folks that are looking to purchase real estate. Although, as I've learned, you can't use it to buy a condo. So don't try to do that. And then finally, education benefits. This is largely through what people most know as the GI Bill. I think in the state of Ohio, we have more than 20,000 GI Bill recipients at any given time. I think it equates to more than $250 million of GI Bill supporting recipients here in the state of Ohio. And but it also includes other types of programs like on-the-job training, apprenticeship. Also includes vocational rehabilitation for people they may have certain disabilities but are looking to try to get back to work. It can help pay for things like accommodations and things like that for those disabilities. And so it's a tremendous program, and I can tell you that our office works directly with the VA in terms of trying to help approve those programs. And it's one of the major pushes we're making as we work with employers to try to make sure we're promoting on-the-job training and apprenticeship opportunities so that they can gain access to that veteran workforce. And excuse me while I click through all these little fancy animations. So the federal VA is basically a 3-legged stool. You have the Veterans Health Administration that administers all the hospitals and the clinics that I talked about. You have the Veterans Benefits Administration, which essentially those disability and pension claims, They have an entirely separate part of the VA that adjudicates all those claims that come in from our county veteran service offices. We do have a Cleveland VBA regional office, which is kind of nice to have here in the state of Ohio. And our office does have a regional liaison to that federal office so that we can help our federal VA partners who are adjudicating the claims communicate with the county veteran service officers who are often the ones originating the claims on behalf of the veteran. And then finally, you have the Veteran Cemetery Administration, 2 national cemeteries here in the state of Ohio, Dayton and Ohio Western Reserve. They're beautiful facilities, and they have everything that you might think of if you think of Arlington National Cemetery. The beautiful white grave markers, everything dressed right, dressed and even, and very well taken care of. But they also ensure every veteran who's eligible can receive a bronze grave marker. That's something that our county veteran service offices can work with. I know Mike Schettinger is very familiar with those types of services as far as working with the counties and the VA to ensure that veterans receive the type of services they've earned as their family goes through the bereavement process. And then the little map there, Ohio is part of the VA divides the country up into what are called veteran integrated service networks for the purposes of healthcare. Here in the state of Ohio, we're part of Integrated Service Network 10, which is headquartered in Cincinnati and includes the states of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And all the programs that the VA administers nationwide, their massive homelessness programs, their suicide prevention programs, all those types of programs are administered out of that healthcare system. And so again, we're very fortunate to have the level of services available to our veterans here from the federal government. I think in total, it's almost $7 billion in federal VA spending in the state of Ohio in support of our veterans here. And sorry, again, another seeing eye chart for you, but just to kind of give you an idea of kind of the organization of our department here at the state of Ohio. And I think, nope, but essentially we're a state cabinet agency established in 2008. Originally was called the Governor's Office of Veterans Affairs, that was first established under Governor George Voinovich. By 2005, we're in the middle of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and state government at the time under Governor Taft had decided that it was time to create a new office, a new cabinet level department for the state of Ohio. We were one of the last states that did not have a state level cabinet department for veteran services. And actually the year I was in Iraq, the state government actually initiated a study group that included all the major veterans organizations in the state of Ohio, veterans that were in the state legislature and people in the governor's administration put together a study group to determine the efficacy and the possibility of establishing a cabinet level veteran department. By 2007, 2008, that study group had completed its report, and with Governor Strickland in his administration, they actually introduced a bill and got the department created. And essentially we inherited the Ohio Veterans Home, which is a little bit on the right there, and I apologize again for the size of those slides. But the Ohio Veterans Home operates in Sandusky and Georgetown, which is down in Brown County. The Sandusky facility, again, probably better known to some people as the Old Soldiers and Sailors Home. It's an 800-bed nursing facility. It's the largest single-site nursing facility in the state of Ohio. It has 427 nursing beds and another 200 and some what we call domiciliary beds. And those are for veterans who can generally live on their own, but need some level of assistance full-time, but they have the freedom to come and go from the home. We actually call them residents. And because essentially the Sandusky home is where they live. And it's kind of interesting if you go up there sometimes, some of the vets will even have like their boats parked out in the parking lot. So they'll take them out on Lake Erie for the weekend or something like that. But, and it's a tremendous facility, and we just received $65 million from the state, and we'll get another matching grant from the federal government to renovate that home. It's been through obviously several renovations since the 19th century, but we're looking to really update it to modern standards. I will tell you that I think it was U.S. News, a recent nursing home kind of national rating program rated both the homes in Sandusky and Georgetown as among the top 5 nursing facilities in the state of Ohio. So we usually get, and the service there is supported not just by the state, but all the veterans there are also receiving some level of support from the VA. And so we always say that in terms of the care, it's typically about, probably about a third from the state, a third from the federal VA. And then for those veterans who are able to, there is some assessment to veterans who are of financial means for the services they receive. In terms of the rest of the department, it's pretty kind of standard cabinet agency stuff. But in terms of the most important organizations that we have within the department, we have an Office of Communications. I would argue with you that given the nature of services in the state of Ohio, most things are covered either by the counties or the federal government. And one of the most important things we do as a state agency is communicate, promote, and try to refine those benefits and services. And so our Office of Communications is very important. Also in terms of inculcating some of that information among our state agency partners who own a lot of the services that our veterans interact with. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. I mentioned our state approving agency for GI Bill training. Again, that's an organization that works with all of our higher education institutions. We've done a lot of work in Ohio. Was the first state in the country to offer in-state tuition to veterans and their spouses. That was a bill I worked on. We also required all of our public colleges and universities to establish veteran program offices on campus. And I will tell you that Ohio State University went from 0 to 1,000 when that law was passed. And they have what I consider to be the flagship veteran service and support program in the country. And so we're very proud of the higher ed system we have here in Ohio. The state approving authority is a big part of that. And then we have an Office of Education and Compliance, which works with our county veteran service offices, provides them training and education on the latest things going on at the VA. Most recently, a lot of you may have heard of the VA PACT Act, passed by the federal government related to toxic exposures for Vietnam, Gulf War, and post 9/11 veterans. And so there's been a lot of education for our veteran services offices on the impacts of that act and the type of impacts it's having on disability compensation and pension. And so we have that relationship with our counties to ensure that those county veteran service officers that our veterans interact with have the latest and greatest information they need to be able to provide the best services possible. And then, of course, we also in that office have our liaison with the Cleveland Benefits Regional Office with the federal government that again allows us to kind of help shape. If the VA is rejecting certain things that are in county level claims, then we can communicate that information back to the county and say, this is why this is getting rejected according to the VA. So clean this part up, clean that part up. And then, of course, my little office over here, the Office of Policy and Veterans Programs. I always try to tell people we have one dedicated program. It's my Veterans Workforce Team. And it's a tremendous program. It's something that we developed internally here in the state of Ohio. We were asked about a little less than a decade ago to get involved in the employment sphere. And I said, well, Ohio Department of Job and Family Services already has a robust veteran service program through the Ohio Meets Jobs program. So I don't necessarily want to duplicate a service that already provides direct services to veterans and helping them with resumes and job postings. And so we decided to actually provide a level of service to the employer side. That was one thing we had always heard, that JFS was supposed to do some of that stuff, but it always got focused on the veteran, understandably, in terms of bandwidth and capability. So we decided to kind of fill that gap on our own. So we actually pulled a team together. We actually started interacting with employers across the state of Ohio from different sectors and began to ask them a little bit, what are some of the barriers or challenges that you have experienced in terms of engaging with veteran employment systems or veterans that work for you? And let's see if we can try to help smooth those out. And so we use that feedback to develop what we have now is 9 one-hour training modules that are all accredited by the Society for Human Resource Management. I have 3 regional veteran workforce consultants who are headquartered in Columbus, Dayton, and Akron. And their job is in their territories, which are roughly aligned with the Jobs Ohio economic development regions, is to provide and consult with those employers in their region on the best practices for recruiting and retaining veterans in the workforce. Before it was kind of like, we had double-digit unemployment in Ohio and veteran unemployment was very high. And it was like, oh gosh, we got to get these folks in. What I talk to them about now is that veteran unemployment is generally around 2%, generally runs under the civilian rate. And so when it comes to accessing veteran talent, it's less about the fact that there's going to be veterans at the door, pounding it down to get into your company. It's going to be more, no, you really have to compete for this talent. And so the better that you are seen as a veteran-friendly organization, that they see that there's veterans that work for you, that they get certain kind of benefits like being able to take leave for things like VA appointments and other things, the more likely it is you're going to retain that veteran. We also talk a lot about salary expectations and what, if a HR shop or a hiring manager doesn't understand what an enlisted or officer pay range is, and they know that they've got a veteran of a certain pay range, let's say it was an E5 sergeant type or petty officer, and goes into an organization at a pay rate that doesn't factor in things like their housing, their insurance, their food, things that were all paid for when they were in the military, then there's going to be a bit of a salary mismatch there, and you're going to end up losing that employee in the first year because they're going to go to a different job that pays them better and that better reflects what they expected coming out of the military. So the idea is to try to reduce that. And we work very closely with our Jobs Ohio partners. We've also initiated what we call veteran talent attraction. We're working with Jobs Ohio. We're actually going to transitioning service member events around the country. Ohio, we identified as being a net donor state to the military. More people enlist into the military every year out of Ohio than return to Ohio upon separation or retirement. So we get a little bit less than 10,000 a year come back to Ohio from the active duty, but well more than 10,000, almost double that, go into the military from Ohio almost every year. So we're now trying to work to reverse that as we bring in new organizations like Intel, the EV battery plant, all these great investments that are going on around Ohio in terms of jobs. Veterans are seen as one of those key workforces that we need to be able to take advantage of. And we're having some level of success. Our Jobs Ohio partners recently went to the Air Force Association annual conference in Washington, D.C. and sponsored a big part of the conference. And so when all those members from the Air Force community from around the world ended up going into that conference in the main ballroom, it was all Ohio branded advertising and things like that in terms of trying to help kind of popularize Ohio, not only as a place for veterans and their service members to transition to, but obviously in the areas of federal and military level defense investment in our economy and jobs and factories and things like that. So a lot of great work going on across the sector. And again, a little bit of a seeing eye chart, but the point of this slide was to try to demonstrate that we have our fingers in a lot of pies. Our department doesn't own a lot of the state level or federal or county level services that your veterans may encounter. But what we do is we try to act as a bit of an ombudsman. I can tell you I have relationships and sit on, what I briefed the director the other day is that we are on about 35 different interagency or interorganizational committees, brain injury, mental health, jobs, homelessness, voting. I helped the Ohio Supreme Court put together their annual Veterans Summit. That's a completely separate elected office, but we try to assist them because they have an important role in the creation of veterans courts across the state of Ohio. We have about 27 veterans courts in the state of Ohio. And so there's a good chance that if there's something going on, I just the other day went to the first gathering of what hopefully will be a new Ohio Veterans Chamber of Commerce, helping to promote veteran business and things like that in the state of Ohio. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of organizations that we work with. We work with private and public organizations to try to help promote veteran services. And there's no one that we won't meet with or talk to. And really, Ohio is a tremendous state for veterans. It really is. Once folks get here, we have a pretty good record of holding on to them. And it's largely because of organizations like this. Ohio is a very civic-minded state. People here are very civically engaged in an organization such as this. And it really makes it a little bit easier to sell the state once. And once we get them here, they typically never leave. So I know I have a couple minutes left. I want to thank you very much for your time and attention and ask anybody if they happen to have any questions that I can answer. And you're more than welcome. I'll be around a little bit. If you have any things you'd like to ask me on a sidebar, that'd be fine as well. Yes, sir.
So when a veteran's identified as homeless, then how does your youth organization engage that individual?
Okay, so the question was for folks online was, how does our organization engage as we identify a homeless veteran? I will tell you that the big part of veteran homeless services is at the federal VA. They have a $1 billion program, and here in Ohio, they have veteran homeless coordinators at every major VA center. And they cooperate with local, like community homeless coalitions. So in Ohio, maybe Cohio for the balance of state continuum of care, the 88 counties, and then there's the 8 large metro counties that have their own continuums of care of homelessness. They will collaborate directly with those organizations as they conduct their annual point in time counts every January. So like here in Columbus, the Columbus VA works with the city and other homeless advocacy organizations. And as they identify veterans or veteran affiliated individuals in those point in time counts, they make sure they connect them very robustly to the various pieces of federal homelessness services. That includes supportive housing, sheltered emergency shelters, and then of course there's always some unsheltered folks. And that's generally how that occurs. It's largely at the federal level. They collaborate with the county veteran service offices, the cities, and the local housing continuums to make sure those folks are identified. I will tell you that the VA made a major initiative of tackling homelessness about a decade ago. They dedicated billions of dollars, thousands of staff. Every homeless veteran in Ohio is generally identified. Each one is assigned a social worker, a peer mentor, and if applicable, a vocational rehabilitation specialist to help them get back to work if they want to. And of course, other services like addiction recovery or other things. And when I first started working at the state of Ohio, they would identify as many as 100 unsheltered veterans across the state. I think recently the number's gotten as low as 32. That doesn't mean there's not other homeless veterans. There's also at risk for homelessness and people in shelters. Generally speaking, that number has been below 200. But obviously an ever present and ever, it's something they have to deal with all the time, obviously, because that point in time change may change, economic, and obviously Ohio is facing a number of addiction crises that are exacerbating problems like homelessness and things like that. And so, but the VA is very good at working with communities to tackle that issue.
Thank you.
Do you do any work with the National Veterans Memorial Museum?
Yeah, so the question was if we work with the National Veterans Memorial Museum. We do. Obviously, that was a major get for the state of Ohio. Originally, it was supposed to be just kind of a county community museum. And what they do a great job of is, promoting veterans and their story around the country. They've built unmatched collaborations with community organizations. That's one thing they've gotten better at, is understanding they are a Columbus, Franklin County-based museum. And so working with the Columbus and Franklin County area veteran organizations, nonprofit communities, they're very good at bringing that stuff together. So we do partner with them, particularly when it comes to promoting Ohio as a destination, particularly when it comes to promoting veteran services. There are sometimes maybe where it leans into a little bit where our director may say to the director of the museum, hey, you're kind of leaning into our job. But quite frankly, the NVMM is unmatched in its ability to promote services for veterans. If you go in, you'll see a lot of my personal colleagues and friends or past colleagues and friends. Jason Dominguez, who's now at Nationwide Insurance, is with Lima Company 325 Marines here in Columbus, and a lot of people know their story. He'll be one of the big faces you see on the cube, and every time I go in, I see him, I'm like, oh my God, there's Jason. But also folks like Tom Moe, who's a former director of our agency, was a POW in Vietnam. And my uncle, actually, who's now retired from Ohio History Connection, actually used to work in their military collections and is responsible for helping to put together a lot of the Ohio-based military gear you may see on display. So it's a great facility.
So if we can hold a question,
Yeah.
we got a big agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.